We're going to jump straight into a banging new video from American Senator Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz has a terrible reputation within the Republican Party and within the Democrat Party, but that's been changing just lately.
A lot of Americans have concerns that big tech media companies, and Google in particular, are engaged in political censorship and bias. As you know, Google enjoys a special immunity from liability under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. The predicate for that immunity was that Google and other big tech media companies would be neutral public fora. Are you familiar with a report that was released yesterday from Veritas? There's a video from a woman, Jen Janai. It's a secret video that was recorded. Jen Janai, as I understand it, is the head of, quote, responsible innovation for Google. As I understand it, she is shown in the video saying, and this is a quote, Elizabeth Warren is saying that we should break up Google. And like, I love her, but she's very misguided. Like, that will not make it better. It will make it worse. Because all these smaller companies who don't have the same resources that we do will be charged with preventing the next Trump situation. It's like a small company cannot do that. Do you think it's Google's job to, quote, prevent the next Trump situation? So a different individual, a whistleblower identified simply as an insider at Google with knowledge of the algorithm, is quoted on the same report as saying, Google, quote, is bent on never letting somebody like Donald Trump come to power again. Do you think it's Google's job to make sure, quote, somebody like Donald Trump never comes to power again?
No, sir, I don't think that is Google's job. And we build for everyone, including every single religious belief, every single demographic, every single region, and certainly every political affiliation.
Well, I have to say that that certainly does not appear to be the case. Of the senior executives at Google, do you know of a single one who voted for Donald Trump? The public records show that in 2016, Google employees gave to the Hillary Clinton campaign $1.315 million. That's a lot of money. Care to venture how much they gave to the Trump campaign?
I would have no idea, sir.
Well, the nice thing is it's a round number, $0.00. Not a penny, according to the public reports. Let's talk about one of the PowerPoints that was leaked. The Veritas report has Google internally saying, I propose we make machine learning intentionally human-centered and intervene for fairness. Google, according to this whistleblower, deliberately makes recommendations if someone is searching for conservative commentators, deliberately shifts the recommendation, so instead of recommending other conservative commentators, it recommends organizations like CNN or MSNBC or left-leaning political outlets. Is that occurring?
Thank you, sir. I can't comment on search algorithms or recommendations given my purview.
One of these documents that was leaked explains what Google is doing, and it has a series of steps. Training data are collected and classified, algorithms are programmed, media are filtered, ranked, aggregated, and guaranteed, and that ends with people, parentheses, like us, are programmed. Does Google view its job as programming people with search results?
For me, this is partly personal, partly professional, partly political, and a highly emotive issue. Just a few days ago, I made a video on this channel announcing my conclusion after years of being a YouTube content creator that what most people perceive as the automated result of an algorithm is, in my educated opinion, in fact the work of human hands. Intentional decisions made by human beings, even though those decisions may well be enabled by software, in the same way that when you're writing an essay, you're enabled by a word processor. A better comparison, perhaps, people who work on the stock market, buying and trading shares, their work is enabled by computer technology, but the decisions are still being made by human beings. And one skeptical response I received was that you can't possibly imagine human beings are micromanaging the videos that are being promoted and the videos that are being suppressed on YouTube to this extent, that they're micromanaging these kinds of fine points of political distinction. And I say to that, if you visit any house that's for sale, you might say, it's impossible that a real estate agent is micromanaging the furniture in this house. But guess what? It's completely standard in the real estate agency to be staging houses, for the real estate agent to pay attention to the tables and chairs in the room and minor details in how the house appears. And why? Because that is the core of their business. What we're talking about here with Google is right at the center of what they do. It's the value added. It's the value they present to the world. Their whole competitive struggle has everything to do with selecting what they consider quality content and making sure that's pushed to the fore, and suppressing content, the type of content they used to be infamous for, like a video of two kids in the schoolyard having a fist fight. Just 10 years ago, when you said YouTube, that was what people thought about. YouTube has fought very, very hard for the veneer of respectability they now have. And it's a real credit. It's a real credit to Ted Cruz that he's now standing up and he is tearing that illusion down. Guys, one of the most underrated principles in the American Constitution is the principle of equal protection under the law. And I like to expand that by saying equal protection under the law and equal benefit under the law. One of the reasons why that's not quoted and discussed as often is that it's a later amendment to the Constitution. It's not part of the original debates of the Founding Fathers in American jurisprudence. It's also even embarrassingly quite a bit later than the U.S. Civil War. It sort of comes into American history later than it should. But it's really the most fundamental principle. Fairness is too vague. What you need are standards that can apply to everyone equally. So I've said this before about censorship. I'm completely comfortable with censorship as long as the standards are transparent, simple, enforceable, and apply to everyone equally. So if YouTube decides that there's absolutely no nudity on YouTube, and they define nudity so nobody can show their nipples, fine, then that's the rule. There are no nipples on YouTube. In the past, that actually wasn't their rule. If you've been around YouTube for a few years, they used to allow nudity on YouTube under certain conditions, and they changed their mind on that one. The problem is that YouTube has been enforcing impossibly biased and one-sided standards. I was talking in a forum lately where everyone was more left-wing than me. Everyone in this room was here on the internet, it was voice chat. And I pointed out to them what YouTube is doing right now is enforcing a standard against the right wing that they have not and would never enforce against the left wing. Well, what do you mean? Well, it seems to me that right now, anyone who makes excuses for or voices their opinion in support of right-wing violence, or who states, shall we say, revisionist history, lies about last 200 years of history, in favor of a right-wing position, those voices are suppressed and banned outright, often very dramatically banned outright. Lifetime bans for the user, shutting down channels, not just demonetization. And of course, we have a somewhat ridiculous example that's caught the public imagination. So I'm talking here, up to this point, I'm talking about extreme politics, political extremism on the right wing. But what the public is currently focused on is a comedian, Steven Crowder, who made disparaging comments about homosexuals. And although those are disparaging comments, although they are offensive, if you consider it within the context of what a stand-up comedian like Chris Rock says, how offensive are they? What is the standard that's supposed to be applied to stand-up comedy on YouTube? Is it the case that what Chris Rock says on HBO, what Chris Rock says on broadcast television, is not permissible on YouTube? And if so, why? And if so, if there's one standard, that standard has to be applied to right-wing people, left-wing people. It has to be applied the same to Japanese people and people in India. People in Japan tell lies about World War II also, right? This is getting into a really difficult to enforce area that's not as simple as the binary question between nudity and no nudity, nipples and no nipples. So Steven Crowder gets demonetized for making offensive jokes, but being offensive is integral to stand-up comedy. Case in point, Chris Rock. Case in point, innumerable stand-up comedians, many of whom are intentionally offensive. That's an aspect of stand-up comedy. You could have a rule, if you want to, you could have a rule for all of YouTube, no stand-up comedy. That stand-up comedy is banned, and then some other website could compete with YouTube by saying, hey, They're the website that has videos where comedy is allowed and encouraged, even if it's offensive. And if YouTube wants to, they can have very strict standards of censorship, and they can be open about it if they apply it fairly and consistently. Equal protection under the law and equal benefit, right? But that is not what's going on now, and it never has been and never will be. I have raised this again and again when I talk to left-wingers. If you believe that a voice like Evalian, extreme right-winger, especially when she started, extreme right-winger, if you think that Evalian should be shut down for lying about history, what do you think about Richard Wolff? Richard Wolff just as a brand new series of videos lying about the history of the Soviet Union, lying about the history of communism at every stage. His newest video is 1917 to 1975. Why is it that the left wing can lie about the massacres of millions of people, in some cases tens of millions of people? Why is it they get to lie about history with impunity? Why is it the left wing makes calls for violence, actively advocating and making excuses for radical left-wing violence? I made a video calling out Mexi. Mexi is a communist, extreme left-wing YouTuber. And a whole bunch of my supporters on Patreon like denounced me. Some of them quit and stuff because I would point the finger at her. So no, this is over the line. This is not acceptable. She was approving of a YouTube channel, left-wing, extremist, communist YouTube channel, where they literally were showing film in support of this with men in masks, holding assault rifles. And these men, they weren't just posing for the camera. Some of them, like the Naxalites in India, they're going out and murdering people. They're going out and murdering police officers and factory owners. That's a form of communism with an ongoing body count. Anyway, when I actually was talking about this in a room with a bunch of left-wing people, their reply to me was, this shows how brainwashed people on the left are, especially people here on YouTube. Their reply to me was, well, you know, the difference is that the right wing is attached to real-world violence, whereas in the left wing, the talk about the revolution and violence is only hypothetical. That shows just what a dangerous delusion is currently ruling over people left of center. And these people have never even heard of the Naxalites. They've never even heard someone like me criticize the extreme violence of communism. Yes, historically, learning less of history, and yes, present and ongoing in our history. Okay? Communism is dangerous. Left-wing violence is just as extreme and shocking and terrible as right-wing violence. And YouTube has a really tough decision to make here. Either they can go back to the way things were like 7 years ago, when the right wing, the left wing, and the people in the middle are all free to criticize each other, where the truth gets to emerge amidst a cacophony of contrasting voices, or YouTube is going to try to become the next CNN. YouTube is going to try to become the next MSNBC. It's going to try to become the next BBC. It's going to become the next tightly controlled, on-message, propaganda, mainstream news and opinion platform. We all know where the money is. We all know which way this is going. In terms of government regulation, YouTube needs to be split up into at least 3 different companies. One of them should be super censored, only presenting children's entertainment. One of them should be way less censored and have comedy, edgy comedy, offensive humor, swearing. One of them should maybe have standards more like HBO. HBO is a mainstream TV, and allow nudity and some degree of sexy drama. I mean, on HBO, there's so much less censorship than here on YouTube. And sure, let's have 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's have many YouTubes competing in the political arena. And let's have some of them, at least, some of them, allowing that cacophony of contrasting opinions.